All right, so we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today. We're talking social contract theory. We've gotten a lot of questions about this lately, and, well, I think it's time for a deep dive.
Yeah, this one is, well, it's really fascinating. It's like, these ideas from way back when are still shaping how we think about things like government and individual rights. It's pretty amazing.
It is. It's kind of like the bedrock, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So let's break it down for everyone listening, okay?
Hmm.
Imagine there's no society, like no rules, no government, just like a state of nature, I think they call it.
Right, a total free-for-all.
Yeah, exactly. So the social contract theory basically says that, to get away from all that chaos, people decided, okay, we're going to give up some of our freedom.
Yeah, it's like a trade-off. Right.
Yeah, exactly. We're trading some freedom for the benefits of, like, living in a society where things are a little more, well, organized.
Yeah. Right, like protection and order and all that. But the thing is, the big question is how we make that trade. And that's where these big-time philosophers come in.
Yeah, we're talking Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau.
Exactly. And they all had, well, they had really different ideas about what this, state of nature even looked like.
Right.
So that totally changed how they thought the social contract should work.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's start with Hobbes. He's kind of the gloomy one of the bunch, right?
Yeah, definitely. You could say that. I mean, Hobbes lived through the English Civil War, which was just brutal, like tons of conflict and instability.
Oh, yeah.
So that probably had a big impact on how he saw human nature.
Yeah.
He basically thought that without a really strong ruler, life would be a war of all against all.
Oof.
Like nasty, brutish, and short, like the opposite of solitary.
Not the best picture.
Nope, not at all.
So I guess he was pretty eager to sign that social contract then.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And for him, the solution was really clear, absolute power to a single ruler. He thought that was the only way to stop the chaos and keep things safe and secure.
So for him, individual freedom wasn't as important as a stable society.
Pretty much. He thought it was a small price to pay.
Wow, that's a tough one. So what about Locke? He was all about individual rights, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Locke was way more optimistic about people. Like, he believed that even without any government, people had natural rights, rights to life, liberty, and property.
Let me see.
And he said those rights didn't come from a king or a ruler. They just existed naturally, even before any government was around.
Oh, interesting. So the point of government for Locke wasn't giving people rights, but protecting the ones they already had.
Exactly. For Locke, that's what the social contract is all about. People agree to it to create a government that basically acts as a guardian of their freedoms.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's more like a partnership between the individual and the government with Locke. It's not just blind obedience to a ruler like with Hobbes.
You got it. And another key difference. Locke believed in limited government. He thought that if the government started messing with people's rights or didn't hold up its end of the bargain, then the people had a right to revolt.
Right. It's more like a balanced relationship then.
Yeah, for sure. And Locke's ideas, they actually had a huge impact on how modern democracies developed, especially here in the U.S. Like, the Declaration of Independence talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right?
Right.
That echoes Locke's ideas big time. But there's one more person we got to talk about in all of this social contract stuff. Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Yeah, he's the one who brings in that whole general will thing, right?
Exactly.
I got to be honest, I've always found that concept kind of hard to grasp. Like, what does it actually mean?
Yeah, it can be tricky. But like Locke, Rousseau also thought the state of nature was actually pretty peaceful.
Oh.
But he was really worried about things like inequality and corruption, things that could happen because of private property and people just looking out for themselves.
I see.
So his solution, the general will, it's this idea that represents what's good for everyone in society, even if it goes against what some individuals want.
So it's not just like a majority rules kind of thing. It's more about what's truly best for the whole community, even if some people disagree.
Exactly.
Man, that sounds like it could lead to some pretty intense arguments.
Yeah, for sure. Figuring out what the general will really is and making sure it's not twisted or used to shut people up, that's a huge challenge. Rousseau's ideas really force us to think about how individual freedom and the good of the whole group, how they work together. It's a tension that's still super relevant today.
Absolutely. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground already. We've got Hobbes with his absolute ruler, Locke with his hardcore defense of individual rights, and Rousseau with this focus on the common good. 3 totally different ways to look at the social contract.
Yeah, and each one has its strengths and weaknesses.
Right. And that kind of brings us to the heart of our deep dive today, right? We're talking about these theories that were developed so long ago,
Yeah.
but they're asking questions that feel more relevant than ever.
Totally.
Which vision fits best with the world we live in now? Which one gives us the best way to deal with the crazy challenges of the 21st century? That's what we really want to dig into.
Exactly. That's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. Welcome back. So we left off talking about these different versions of the social contract, right?
We did, yeah.
Well, now it's time to see how these ideas from like way back when, how they actually apply to, well, to the world we're living in today.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And, when we were talking about Hobbes and his kind of dark view of humanity, I couldn't help but think about all the stuff happening in the world right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with so much division and like those strongman leaders popping up everywhere and just, bad news constantly. It's easy to kind of start seeing things through that Hobbesian lens.
It makes sense, When everything feels uncertain, kind of scary, it's natural to want stability and security, even if it means giving up a little freedom. That's kind of Hobbes' whole point, right? That
Yeah.
we need order, we need a strong leader. And that idea, well, it can be pretty appealing when things feel chaotic.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, though, how much freedom are we willing to give up just to feel safe?
Yeah.
And at what point does, all that order just become oppressive? That's where I start to think about Locke and all his ideas about, limited government and individual rights.
Absolutely. Locke is like this constant reminder that those individual freedoms, they're not something we should just toss aside, even when things are tough. His whole thing about those natural rights to life, liberty, and property, that's like the foundation of so many democracies.
Right. And thinking about Locke, it also makes me think about, all the debates we have now about privacy and, the government being able to watch everything we do online in the name of national security.
Oh, yeah.
That's like the classic example of trying to balance freedom and security, isn't it?
It is, for sure. It's like, how do you protect people from danger, but also make sure they have their privacy, that nobody's spying on them for no reason? It's a tough one, and it's at the heart of a lot of our political debates today. But going back to Locke, his ideas, they can really help us think through these issues.
They do. So we've got Hobbes, warning us about chaos and making us think about strong leaders. And then we've got Locke reminding us about the importance of individual freedom, especially when things are difficult.
Yeah.
But what about Rousseau and his whole general will concept? Where does that fit in with all of this?
That's where things get really interesting, I think. Because Rousseau, he's all about the common good, right? He's saying we need to focus on what's best for everyone, for the whole society, even if it means sometimes putting aside our own individual wants. And that idea, well, it feels really relevant today, especially with all the global challenges we're facing.
All right. It's like climate change, pandemics, all that stuff. It's clear we can't just solve those problems by ourselves.
Exactly. We're all interconnected, right? We need to work together. So in a way, Rousseau is kind of pushing us to think beyond our own little bubbles and see the bigger picture.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I keep coming back to this question of how we actually figure out what the general will is. It sounds great in theory, but in the real world, well, defining it, let alone actually putting it into practice, seems, well, almost impossible.
Right. It's tough. And that's the big challenge with Rousseau's theory. I mean, he thought the general will comes about when everyone is being open and honest and really trying to put the common good above their own self-interest.
Okay.
But getting everyone on the same page like that, especially in today's world where everything's so diverse and complicated, well, it's not easy.
Yeah, you have to wonder if maybe Rousseau's vision is just a little too idealistic, I can't really imagine everyone putting aside all their individual wants and desires and just agreeing on what's best for everyone.
It's definitely a challenge, but I wouldn't say Rousseau's ideas are totally out there. I mean, think about all those movements we see popping up now, pushing for social justice, for environmental protection. Those are examples of people coming together and saying, hey, we need to work on this together.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
They're recognizing that we're all connected, that our individual actions, well, they have an impact on everyone else. So even if we never reach some perfect agreement, just the act of trying to create a more inclusive, more equitable society where everyone's voice matters, well, that's something worth striving for.
I agree with that. So if we're really talking about creating a social contract that actually works for the 21st century, it sounds like we need to take a little bit from all three of these thinkers, right?
Yeah.
We need Hobbes' realism to, keep us grounded, remind us about order and stability. We need Locke's passion for individual liberty to make sure nobody's getting stepped on. And we need Rousseau's vision of the common good to, well, to help us move forward together in a way that's sustainable and just.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's not about picking a winner or saying one philosopher is better than the others. It's about taking the best parts of each of their ideas and using them to create something that, something that actually fits the world we live in, a world that's constantly changing and throwing new challenges our way.
Yeah. It's like we're taking these different threads and weaving them together into something new.
Exactly. And that's what I love about the idea of the social contract. It's not some ancient document set in stone. It's a living, breathing agreement, something that we, both as individuals and as a whole society, we're constantly working on shaping and reshaping.
This is giving me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I'm curious, you've talked about the strengths and weaknesses of all these different theories. But if you had to pick, which one do you think, which one offers the best vision for the future?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know if I have a clear answer. Each theory has its good points and its problems,
I get it. It's not like there's one perfect answer. But, well, if we're really trying to make things better, build a more just world, which of these ideas do you think, which one gives us the best shot at actually getting there?
That's a good question. If we were going to write a social contract for right now for the 21st century, I think it would have to lean pretty heavily on Locke's ideas about individual rights, and limited government. I mean, think about it. Technology is changing everything. Globalization is connecting everyone. And the way we think about power, it's all shifting. So protecting things like freedom of speech, freedom to, hang out with whoever you want, and the right to privacy, that's super important now more than ever.
Yeah, I see your point. But how do we balance all the individual freedom with, the need to work together, especially when we're talking about those big global problems we mentioned before?
Right. And that's where Rousseau comes in. His idea of the general will, that's key here. We got to find ways to say, hey, my individual rights are important, but also, hey, we're all in this together. We got to take care of each other, got to take care of the planet.
So with climate change, right? We can't just ignore people's rights in the name of saving the environment.
Exactly. It's got to be both individual rights and working together for the common good.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. But then how do we make sure that this whole general will thing, how do we make sure it doesn't get, hijacked, by people who just want to use it for their own benefit or to silence anyone who disagrees with them? That seems like a real possibility.
Oh, it totally is. And that's why it's so important to protect democracy. We got to make sure the government is transparent, that they're accountable to the people.
Yeah.
And we need to encourage open discussion and debate where everyone feels like they can speak their mind.
That's true.
Because the social contract, it's not something you just agree to once and then forget about it. It's an ongoing thing. We're always working on it, shaping it, making sure it actually works for everyone.
This has been, it's been a really eye-opening conversation. We started with no society at all, and now we're talking about, all the complexities of the world today. And these thinkers, they might have been writing centuries ago, but the questions they were asking, they're still so relevant to what we're dealing with right now.
I totally agree. It makes you realize how much we still have to learn from them, right?
Yeah, it does.
Thinking about their ideas, it helps us see the bigger picture. It reminds us that finding that balance between, individual freedom and working together, that's crucial. And protecting democracy, being able to talk openly and honestly about these things, that's how we move forward.
Absolutely. Well, to everyone listening, I'll leave you with this. If you were writing a social contract for today, for right now, what would you put in it? How would you balance, taking care of yourself and taking care of each other? What kind of world would you want to create?
Good questions.
They are. They're big questions, but they're the ones we need to be thinking about. So keep exploring these ideas, keep asking questions, and keep trying to make the world a little bit better, a little bit more just. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.